You're already mad, aren't you? I hadn't even said anything and you're already mad. Man, what's that like? What's that like? Be mad, get mad that quick. It's easy to trigger y'all. As soon as you saw this video, you were mad. You clicked on it right away, too. I did the video yesterday about some of the point spreads that have recently come out for this upcoming season's games. Some of the bigger games, some of the more interesting games, whatever. Talked a lot about the Tennessee games in that video yesterday, and I said, let me know if there's any other games or teams you want me to talk about. And a lot of different suggestions in that video, and I'll get to some of them over the next couple of days. But a lot of people were asking about Ohio State, Michigan, Ohio State versus Michigan, all that. So here we go. Let's take a look at the early lines for some of the Ohio State games. And look, there's no need to beat around the bush here. We'll start with the game at the end of the year, Ohio State and Michigan. And, of course, Michigan is favored. It's at Michigan. Michigan's beat them 2 years in a row. Michigan's won the Big Ten 2 years in a row. Michigan's made the playoffs 2 years in a row. Not only has Michigan beat Ohio State 2 years in a row, they've blown them out 2 years in a row. The game hasn't even been competitive in the second half for 2 straight years. Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan has just absolutely dominated, humiliated, and embarrassed Ohio State over the last 2 years. So it shouldn't be a surprise, really, to anyone that Michigan is favored over Ohio State based on just those facts alone. But if you want to look at the two teams, okay, well, Ohio State's loaded. They got a lot coming back. The wide receivers are loaded. The running backs are loaded. Probably need to improve a little along the offensive line, and then, of course, they lose C.J. Stroud. So you got a little bit of a quarterback competition going on. Ohio State fans didn't seem too happy with the way the quarterback played in the spring game. We'll see what happens when the other guy gets back from the, was it like a thumb injury or something, kept him out. So we'll see. I mean, when was the last time Ohio State didn't have a quarterback that could put up 5,000 yards? It's been a while, so the quarterback probably going to be okay. And then, you know, of course, Ohio State defensively has got to play better in certain areas in certain games. I mean, that's just reality. I mean, I think Ohio State fans know that. You can't continue to give up 250-plus yards rushing to Michigan and expect to win. I mean, if someone could go into the future and then come back and say, Lou, I'm not going to tell you who won the game, but I'll tell you this, Michigan had 260 yards rushing, I'm going to say, well, Michigan won again then. So, you know, we'll see. But it's not a surprise that Ohio State's favored in that, or that Michigan is favored in that game over Ohio State. Michigan's got a ton coming back, including the quarterback. As much as I like Travion Henderson and Ohio State's running backs, Michigan's running backs are probably better with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. I don't have any questions about Michigan's offensive line. My thing with Michigan still is like playmakers on the outside. I love their line of scrimmage. I love their running backs. I think the quarterback is I don't know that the quarterback is going to single-handedly win games for Michigan. He's not a C.J. Stroud or a Bryce Young or a Caleb Williams. McCarthy I'm talking about. He's more Stetson Bennett than he is Bryce Young. And I don't mean that as an insult or a compliment. That's just how I view him. He's not going to take a game over. He's not a guy that if the rest of your team is struggling, he's going to put the entire team on his back and carry you to some sort of victory. But he's good enough to win a bunch of games when everyone around him is playing well. He's not going to do anything to screw it up most times, right? We saw that last year. Now, he had some key mistakes in that game against TCU. A couple of pick sixes. Well, I'm not going to relitigate the Michigan and TCU game. We all know what happened there. But overall, you know, with what Michigan's got coming back, they're going to be okay offensively. They've been pretty good defensively year in and year out under Harbaugh. Michigan's going to be really, really good. I'm not surprised they're favored. This is by 2.5. You know, basically, you know, Vegas typically gives a team 2 or 3 points for home field advantage. So that's basically saying, look, these teams appear to be pretty equal right now. Looking forward, I mean, we're still 7 months away from this game being played, but you know, that's basically what they're telling you is these teams look pretty equal. We're going to give Michigan a couple of points for home field advantage and mark them up as a 2.5-point favorite. That's the way I read this here on DraftKings, if I can be serious for a little bit and sort of put the trash talking to the side. But if we scroll back to kind of the beginning of the year and look at some of Ohio State's earlier games that they have coming up, of course, they have a big game early in the year with Notre Dame. That game's in, what, week 2 or 3, something like that. Let's see. Let me scroll down until I can find it here. There's the Tennessee-Florida game again. Tennessee. Hilljack's mad about that video yesterday. Wow. Georgia's a 24-point favorite over South Carolina. 24. Dang. Week 2. I can't wait for that game. South Carolina's my most hated. I can't stand South Carolina. Georgia favored by 24. Well, I'm looking for Ohio State and Notre Dame, though. Here we go. Ohio State and Notre Dame. This is a road game for Ohio State. So here's another issue with Ohio State that doesn't have to do with any one game in particular, but just maybe trying to forecast Ohio State over the course of the year. They got to play at Notre Dame and at Michigan. I mean, look, I like to laugh at Notre Dame as much as anybody else does, but they're a legitimately good team. Are they great? That remains to be seen. There've been very few years where they've been great in the last 35 years or so. I mean, they haven't won a major postseason game since like 1989. But they have made the playoffs a time or two. They've made several New Year's Six bowls. They've lost them all, of course. But, bringing in Sam Hartman, whatever you think about Sam Hartman, or maybe you don't think anything out of it all. I don't know. Maybe, Ohio State and Michigan fans, I'm not sure how much ACC football some of y'all watch. Sam Hartman is a good quarterback. He's not just a product of being in the ACC or whatever. He's a legitimately good quarterback. He's going to be the best quarterback Notre Dame's had in a long, long time. What will that mean for, Notre Dame's performance on the field this year? Well, we're going to have to wait and see on all that. But, playing at Notre Dame early in the year, at Michigan late in the year, I mean, those are two, probably your toughest two games. And they're both on the road. You are favored in this one against Notre Dame, though, by about a touchdown. What is it? Yeah, you're favored by 7 in this one on the road at Notre Dame. This was a weird game last year to me. Notre Dame had the brand new coach, Marcus Freeman. It was first game of the year, wasn't it, last year? I believe it was first game of the year last year in Columbus, in Ohio State. And a lot of people, myself included, expected Ohio State to run away with that game and completely blow them out. And that didn't really happen. Ohio State ended up winning the game 21-10. Kind of a sloppy game on both sides offensively. Ohio State never really able to get going offensively against Notre Dame. And Notre Dame, well, they never really got out of neutral in that game offensively against Ohio State. And that was sort of the theme for Notre Dame for the first half of the season. Their offense was non-existent the first 5-6 weeks of the season. I mean, they went on to lose to Marshall and Stanford and all that kind of stuff. So. But we'll see. I think Ohio State's a better team than Notre Dame. I'm not at all surprised, even though it's a road game for Ohio State, that this far out they're favored. They're favored by a touchdown. What else do they have on here involving Ohio State? I'm sure they have the Ohio State-Penn State game. I saw it on here yesterday. They might even have the Michigan State game on here too. I would expect Ohio State to be a huge favorite over Michigan State. And as far as the Penn State game goes, probably somewhere in between Notre Dame and Michigan. Let's see. Michigan and Michigan State. Michigan's favored by 17.5 over Michigan State. Ohio State and Penn State. Yeah, Ohio State's favored by 10.5. Now, this is the one you get at home. So, Michigan and Notre Dame on the road, but then you get Penn State at home. Some people, myself included, are pretty high on Penn State this year. Now, unlike Ohio State, okay, the Penn State and Ohio State are both going into this season with new quarterbacks. Unlike Ohio State, though, I'm not as confident that Drew Allar is going to be great. He needs to, if Penn State wants to do what they think they can do this year, he needs to be great. But Penn State over the last decade hasn't had the run of QBs that have put up numbers like Ohio State has. Sean Clifford never really lived up to the hype, in my opinion. In fact, are there any Penn State fans watching? Can someone tell me what was the biggest game Sean Clifford won in his 21 years as starter at Ohio State? Is there any big game you ever won with Sean Clifford at quarterback? I would be curious to know. I can't recall one. So I think it's good for Penn State overall that they're moving on. He's gone now, and you have Drew Allar, who was very highly rated. Everybody wanted him. He's a big, strong kid. It looks like sort of your old school prototypical quarterback. Not everybody looks for that anymore, but that's what he looks like. He's going to have to play at an extremely high level if Penn State wants to get where they want to go. Because to get where they want to go, they got to do things like win this game on the road at Ohio State, which is not going to be easy. I don't think they've beat Ohio State since 2016, but they're going to have a really good defense. Like Michigan, they're going to have a great ground game. If I was Penn State, and who knows, maybe they tried this last year and they just didn't have the talent to do it. Last year's Penn State-Ohio State game, by the way, much closer than the final score indicated. And I think even Ohio State fans would have to admit this. I mean, Penn State had the ball there at the end, down whatever it was, 6-7 points. and there was a couple of minutes to go in the game. And did Penn State fumble? It was either a fumble or an interception that was returned for a touchdown by Ohio State that made it a 2-score game there at the end. But that was a good game last year. Penn State needs to watch and then rewatch and then watch again the last 2 years of Ohio State versus Michigan, because Penn State is Michigan. It's a similar team. Neither of these teams are going to come out and light you up for 400 yards through the air. Neither of these teams have a C.J. Stroud-type QB and 4 NFL wide receivers. That's not who these teams are. These are line of scrimmage teams. Penn State and Michigan are sort of what I consider to be old school Big Ten football. And I don't mean that in a bad way. And by old school, I don't mean 100 years ago. I mean old school in that, you know, the Big Ten that I started watching when I first started watching football in the late 80s and early 90s. Just the big offensive lines, dominate you, beat you up in the trenches, sort of think of the Keith Jacksons. What did he used to call them? The big uglies up, whatever he used to call them, the hog mollies and all, whatever. Penn State and Michigan are similar types of teams, and Michigan has been able to use that style to sort of suffocate Ohio State over the last 2 years. Penn State needs to, I think, have a similar approach. So, you know, don't turn the ball over. Pound, 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 pound. That's what Michigan does, and it doesn't always work in the first half, but if you look over the last 2 years in that Michigan-Ohio State game, look at the rushing numbers in the second half. Eye-opening. Eye-opening. Penn State, I think, has a chance in this game. I'm obviously high on Penn State, but that, I think, rests on Drew Allar's ability to throw the ball, because here's the deal. You really didn't have to expect, you didn't have to respect Sean Clifford's ability to beat you with his arm. Even though I don't expect Penn State to become an aired-out team with Drew Allar at least has to be good enough and complete enough passes and make enough throws to make the defense respect his ability to do it. That will open up the ground game for Nick Singleton and those Penn State running backs, who are amazing. You know, has potential to be a great game. Hasn't always been a great game in recent memory. Was a pretty good game last year. Penn State on the road at Ohio State. Ohio State favored by 10.5. Let's see, is there any more Ohio State games on here? Wisconsin. Now, this surprises me. Now, I understand the difference between a road game and an away game, but you're a 10.5-point favorite, Ohio State is, over Penn State, but you're only a 9.5-point favorite over Wisconsin. And now you are playing at Wisconsin, you know, which is one of the more difficult environments in the Big Ten, as opposed to the Penn State game being played in Columbus, so I completely get that. But Penn State has been a top 10 team for a few years in a row. They're in everybody's top 10 heading into next year. They're in some people's top 5. Wisconsin is coming off the worst year they've had in forever. They've got a brand new coaching staff, brand new quarterback. It's their coach's first year ever coaching in the Power 5. They're not ranked anywhere in any poll, really. I'm kind of surprised that Wisconsin, or that Penn State is a bigger underdog than Wisconsin. So you're a 9.5-point favorite on the road against Wisconsin and a 10.5-point favorite at home against Penn State. That's a little surprising to me. That's a little surprising. Now, I expect Ohio State to probably win both of those games. Obviously, that's why they're favored. But I'm high on Luke Fickell. I think he's a perfect fit for Wisconsin. He obviously is a Big Ten guy, having spent time at Ohio State. And I don't know, maybe, you know, maybe Luke Fickell's got this Ohio State game circled for that particular reason. I don't know. And it's sort of, you know, you'll get Wisconsin's best punch type deal in that game. But if you just look at the rosters of the two teams, the talent that's there, even with the transfer portal and the things that Luke Fickell's doing there, it's just hard to imagine Wisconsin beating Ohio State in 2023. And even if you're not as high on Penn State as I am, don't you give Penn State a better chance against Ohio State than you do Wisconsin? It just seems odd to me. And look, these people that set these lines, these sports books, they're not idiots. Now, that doesn't mean they get it right every single time. Of course, they get things wrong. But, you know, they're not tearing down casinos in Las Vegas to make them smaller. They're tearing them down to make them bigger. And that's because they make money on a regular basis. So, a lot of times when you see weird lines like this, there's a reason. And Vegas ends up being smarter than we are when it comes to these types of things. But I'll admit it's surprising to me that Penn State is a bigger underdog to Ohio State than Wisconsin is. Let's see, was there any other games on here for Ohio State? They don't have every game on here, like I said yesterday. They just have some of the bigger ones. Somebody asked me in the comments section to do Colorado, I had to go ahead and tell them they only have games on here that people are interested in. So there ain't no Colorado. There ain't nobody interested in Colorado. People interested in watching them lose so they can laugh at them, and that's about it. You're a 24.5 point favorite over Michigan State. Ohio State, man, do y'all think Mel Tucker's going to get fired this year? A lot of people have asked me that. I don't. I mean, he's 2 years removed from the New Year's Six thing, and I know last year was a disaster, and this year's looking like it's probably going to be a disaster too. So I don't know, maybe next year, like 2024, maybe. You know, he ends up being on a hot seat type of deal. Plus, they're just paying him a ton of money. I don't know that Michigan State can afford to buy him out, but I don't think Michigan State's going to have a good year this year. And it doesn't make me happy to say. I'm a fan of Mel Tucker. He spent time at Georgia under Kirby Smart as defensive coordinator before going to Colorado State, of course, and then Michigan State the last few years. So, you know, I don't have anything against Mel Tucker. That's just, it's not looking good for Sparty. But anyway, there you go. That's some of Ohio State's games coming up in the 2023 season. Some of the early lines and odds on those games. What do you think, Ohio State, man? Which game are y'all most worried about? Be honest with me. I know you're going to beat Michigan every year by 100 points, and I know you're probably going to beat Notre Dame by 200, whatever. Well, let me ask you this. Well, actually, I'm going to make it really hard on you. And I know you don't expect to lose 2 games, and I'd be shocked if you did lose 2. When was the last time Ohio State lost 2 games in the regular season? Oh, yeah, 2 years ago. Lost to Oregon. Y'all lost to Oregon? Man, come on. Come on. How do you... At home? You lost to Oregon at home. Anyway, if I had a time machine and I told you that I had been to the future, now I'm back, and I were to tell you that Ohio State went 10-2, who do you think the 2 losses would be to? Is it the obvious, like Notre Dame and Penn State, or is there like a wrinkle in there somewhere? Let me know which 2 games worry you the most, I guess. Anyway, you want to see some more of these? Let me know.